Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Probably to describe my job role, probably a little bit better than a title, is to say that I was the cross-cutting theme sponsor for security in the built environment. It's been an immense privilege to work with the people who have been on the stage throughout today, the design architects, working with iconic structures. But it's almost the challenge for me is how you resolve that conflict of objectives between what is building in effective security from the outset and the same sustainability targets that you've heard about throughout today. I fully appreciate and recognise throughout my commercial background that this was not about a security games. It's not about showcasing security, it's actually about security being an enabler and being a very effective enabler. In my world of built environment, that's absolutely essential in attracting CapEx, capital investment, not just for the games period, but also throughout the legacy environment. So for the purposes of my slides and just my presentation to you today, what I'd like to focus on, if I may, is actually the legacy value that I've been striving to achieve from the ODA, from the Delivery Authority, and how that can flow through into a sustainable environment in legacy. I'll briefly touch on the site. As has been said by many speakers, a very challenging site. 240 hectares, 17-kilometre perimeter. The issue for the ODA was our start point when we started this process of regeneration. Was that this was a mixed industrial site, very much derelict, phenomenal underinvestment, and with our policing colleagues, what is absolutely fundamental, it had one of the highest crime rates in the UK, and to build in that environment, and now as we move towards a legacy, it's fundamentally important not to lose sight of this. The Olympic Games is a transient event which we are obligated to deliver, absolutely, but equally this must not become an Athens post-games, as Tom Jones touched on this morning. My strategic intent absolutely was to establish a baseline foundation for informed security design. At the same time, as I've just said, setting that environment for a safe and secure games. I did have a list of venues and I'd have pointed those out to you, but I think other speakers have quite eloquently done that. But from an ODA's perspective, it wasn't all around the Olympic Park, it was also about the off-park venues. All venues have been delivered to the same methodology, there hasn't been any exception to that. All have taken account of the threats which the Olympics face and also the environment in which those buildings were being constructed. I put a slide in here really as a reminder to myself more than anything. It was very interesting that we can talk about working with the design architects and we immediately think about what we're doing in terms of the built structure above the ground. But what was fundamental for me, and it was a tremendous learning curve, was actually engaging with landscape architects. These people have it within their gift to actually mitigate a lot of the opportunity for crime that actually exists. A lot of the crime reported, as I'll demonstrate later on, comes from or originates from the landscape. And that shouldn't be forgotten. So really, I did put a slide in there to remind myself as much as anything else. Also recognising the resilience of the utilities and infrastructure, both above and below the ground. Structures, bridges and highways, equally. These were not missed from our activities. And it's equally important to recognise that they all we need to face the unique challenges presented by each of those structures. I'll skip through that slide just on the basis of being brief, I think. Enhancing through innovation. Secured by Design is an ACPO branded methodology. I was very fortunate from the start of my journey on this, which has now been sort of 6 years, that from the original bid books, secure by design was well established into the bids. It was a fundamental cornerstone for me and for many. We were able to take that commitment, and I've worked now in both the ODA and in the low-cog space for the last 9 months. We were able to take that statement and actually then embed that as part of our performance criteria in completion of venues and infrastructure work. So it was not falling off of the radar at any time. And as cross-cutting theme sponsor, I was able to push that and promote that at all opportunity. Where I faced a challenge was that secure by design had its origins in new homes. Now, what that meant for me was that when we started to talk about sports venues, or we start to talk about bridges, infrastructure, landscape, standards did not exist in those environments. And so there was the first challenge, was actually to create an informed buyer standard that we could talk to sensibly with the design architects that meant something that was tangible. So from that, we put a lot of effort into developing standards from the outset when we were still at concept building design stages. We did not wait until we had firm designs to start establishing the principles that we needed to follow. I've also put there that the secure by design approach lacked a threat risk-based approach. Now, I don't mean that in a critical way. My background is in critical national infrastructure, and it really is about how do you target a structure to bring about a desired effect for terrorist or criminal intent. I think if you understand that from the outset and you're working with the architects, the concept designers, and you start with that premise and you actually build in security from those very early principles, this is a much easier journey than trying to retrofit standards once the design is well evolved, and it's not welcomed either at that point. So early engagement is absolutely fundamental to our approach. The risk-based approach, I was very thankful that ACPO recognised that with an award to the ODA. There was a sum of money that came with that we were able to donate to charity, and that's very much a spin-off benefit, which I'm quite proud of, that security has actually helped the community in terms of a charitable donation as well. Chris and Robert referred earlier to the different threat risk profiling that has existed around 2012. Stepping back when we were still before enabling works, I was able to use the police metadata that exists on reported crime. We profiled the Olympic Park site, or rather the area around it, taking a sort of a 500-metre swathe outside of the Olympic Park, and profiled the crime into that band. Now, what was interesting is that it is not the same around the Olympic Park. It does have its variances. Around Stratford Station, it's very different to anything from the waterways or from the northern end of the site by the A12. Also having a look at threat risks on a temporal clock. Now, whether this is in the landscape or whether it's in relation to the built environment, again, became phenomenally interesting because when we actually broke it down, there are differences between times of day and hours of the day. Now, that's not just informing about what you need to do within your venue, and if you're a legacy operator of a venue, you need to understand where these threats are coming from, whether it's from within your car park or whether it's an attack against your structure. But how do you actually develop effective mitigation in the specific locations? If it's a preference, maybe, for operational overlay to buy some of those down, but this is about being an informed client, understanding the threat risks that you're confronting from the outset, and then designing effective and proportionate mitigation that is absolutely appropriate and cost-effective. In terms of the crime and terrorism, you saw earlier just that police metadata slide. What we've been able to do is actually to take the Olympic Park map. For those that may have been into POC, you'd have seen this up on the wall in POC, the Park Operations Centre. We broke the park down into 84 segments and effectively took all of the intelligence we had from whatever source. The source wasn't relevant to me at that point. The methodology for assessing threat risks wasn't relevant, but profiled it across the park so that we knew where in the park the most likelihood, the greatest probability for activity may exist. In design terms, then, that meant that we could be very specific as to where we were deploying capital and operational resource to buy those threat risks down at specific locations. It also gave us the ability to form a control opinion through assurance, covertly and overtly, as to whether the mitigations were effective at those locations, which means that it's quite dynamic in the way that it works. Now, I'm referring to ODA space on this because that's how we needed to inform the design. There is a key on that which actually identifies what the different threat categories were. Again, a very interesting piece of work because different agencies have different definitions. I needed to bring those down to one definition for each threat type because that gives me the ability to understand exactly what the threat is and how that needs to be defeated. It is interactive. We do have a demo of how this works. That, if anybody wants to see it, grab us afterwards and we'll show you.
Yeah, we're beginning to.
Right, okay. The drill downs on these do give the explicit insight into how the inherent and controlled risks appear. We have developed, and as Colin's hurrying me up, I'll whiz through quite quickly, quite a raft of generic standards so that we're informing the procurement process right from the outset. It wasn't a retrofit. We've included input to every REBA stage. Every venue has a venue design addendum. So if you are becoming a legacy operator of a venue, there will be a security design quite discrete for that venue. In the same way we profiled crime across the Olympic Park, we profiled it into the venues as well so that we could understand what we're buying down. The threat from an abduction or abuse in a changing room is very different to an attack on a chlorine store, is very different from snatch of cash money from the manager's office. So the mitigations, again, were very explicit. And it was very important as client that we were very explicit because that gives us the ability to reinforce through the assurance delivery against contract specifications. In terms of the terrorist threat, it was not our strategy to harden venues so that they lacked that iconic view. Our strategy very much was to protect life at all cost. And so the best analogy I can give to you is the venues will perform very much like the crumple zone on your car. It will collapse, maybe, it will move, but it actually will not fragment, it will not come apart. It will absolutely protect the occupants of that structure. That allowed the iconic designs to evolve. Dipping into the process from the outset, actually, we found didn't work terribly well on this case. The early estimates for building in the effects of blast resilience from the outset caused an adverse reaction by the architects and by the building community because they felt that they didn't know the subject, and so they were building in large risk margins for performing the work. We allowed the designs to develop until you had a structural model that we could put through dynamic analysis. At that point, we understood the series in which venues failed. Because you understand how they fail, you're better informed by explicit instruction on how to actually protect them and reinforce them. There is this resolution of conflicting priorities, which I've referred to at the bottom of the slide there. You've heard this morning about sustainability targets. Basketball, which is actually this stick model in blue at the top and bottom of the screen there, we had a fine, good model there, structural model, until sustainability told me that they were taking 20% of the steelwork out of the structure, at which point I had a problem because with the overpressures on the structure, actually this, from a resilience perspective, was going to give us a problem. But again, through dynamic analysis of the structure, we're able to explicitly instruct how to protect that structure in a very cost-efficient way. The estimates came down from quite a significant figure, and we delivered all of the resilience security work for only 15%, 15% of the original estimates that were coming through from our delivery partners and from the supplier network. So that really was quite a dramatic saving. In terms of the assurance piece, We took all of our work and fully assured it. If we were working with iconic materials, velodrome, wooden structures, they have been on the blast ranges, and we did put them through very real blast trials. We know that what we have deployed works. Assurance, and this is my last slide, Colin, you please know. Really, I can't undervalue to you the value of assurance in the work that we've done. This has paid for itself time and time again. If you are explicit in setting your client requirements, then you're in a very good position to actually reinforce that throughout delivery and prove what you have delivered is exactly as you commissioned it and as you expected it to be. I think that work was fairly groundbreaking for a lot of the community that we were working with, but it worked very well and they respected it. And I'll wrap up at that point.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, I'm done.